All right, well, I'm going to go ahead and get started. So hello, everyone. In case this is your first time here, my name is Alan Ivory, and I am an ecologist with the University of Florida, with a program called Scientist in Every Florida School. Per usual, I'm going to show you a water quality sampling we're doing here in Florida, tracking the water from Marion County until it reaches the ocean. And so I'll go ahead and get on with that started, and then we'll go to the activity.
Hello everyone. So as you can see, we're in a pretty interesting place today, and I want to kind of tell you the history of what this place is and what it was for. So back during the mid-1900s, about 1935 through the 70s, they had the goal of cutting Florida in half. At the time, the only way to get from the Atlantic side of Florida to the Gulf side of Florida was to go all the way underneath Miami through the Keys of Florida, and it was a long way to travel. So their goal was to cut Florida in half at its narrowest point in order to allow cargo barges to get from one side of the state to the other. This point here is one of those sides. So they started digging in from either side of the state, on the Gulf side of Florida, as well as from the Atlantic side of Florida, and they're gonna meet in the middle. On both sides of Florida, they've run into plenty of problems. On the Gulf side of Florida, they were digging up many springs, and it started costing lots of money to dig up all of that ground. Similar issues were happening on the Atlantic side of Florida. During the 1970s, they had to stop all construction and ended the canals where they were, creating dams or reservoirs in various places of the state. Now that these dams are in place, there's different reservoirs or lakes that were formed. In these lakes, it's bodies of waters that are built up and then sometimes let go, like this dam is doing here. What can happen is water can get built up in different locations for years sometimes, and then be allowed to open up and flow through the rest of the state. This can also affect the plants and animals of an area because they can be stuck in one lake where they'd normally be able to travel all throughout the rest of the state if this dam wasn't here. Whenever water's not moving, there's not much oxygen being exchanged between the air and the water, and it can cause the water to have very little oxygen in it. But here, this dam, with all of this water churning, there's lots of ways for oxygen to get into the water from the air, promoting lots of healthy fish and plant life. Just looking at the water here, we can see it's still fairly stained, and it's fairly cold compared to normal.
All right, so let me go ahead and give you the qualities of this water. Hopefully I don't have that sound issue like I did last time. All right, so for the qualities of this water, temperature, I said it was fairly cold, and that was because it was 25 degrees Celsius. It wasn't the coldest we've seen, but on a cold day like it was then, any amount of water was pretty cold. The pH, it was slightly basic, and I could go and say this because of plant life was in the area, quite a bit of plants. Dissolved oxygen, I showed the picture of it, and it was super, super dark red. And on that scale, the darker red it was, the more oxygen it had. That was the darkest red I've ever seen, and so I'd say it has lots of oxygen. As for turbidity, there was no stuff floating around, not really, but it was cloudy and stained, like I was saying, so partially cloudy. And we're back to no salt. So I'd say the salt's been diluted, or there's just less salt than there was last week. All right, so now I can get into our skill. This is the part I'm extremely excited about. So for our skill, it's right down my alley. We're going to talk about animal track ID. So first I'll talk about my job and how tracks are kind of related to my job. So some animals you can see pretty regularly, or you're able to trap them pretty easily. So for example, this is a fox squirrel in the top left corner. We had a trap that you stick out, put a little like peanut butter or something like that, and the squirrel comes right to the trap and you can catch it. Never gets hurt. We just check it for how big it is, all those sorts of things. Same thing with these hogs. You'll go and put a bunch of food inside, and one of these gates will open up, allowing the hogs to get in, and then it'll close behind them, trapping the hogs inside. The last one is called camera trapping, or just game cameras, trail cameras. And anything that walks in front of this camera in the woods gets caught on the camera. People use this for hunting, but we also go and use it just to go and see what's in the woods. But some things there's less of, and so it might be very hard to go and either less of or very small. And so it might be hard to go and see them. So other ways we can go and track animals is, I talked about it before, it's called eDNA. It's where you go and track what fish are in water based on taking a water sample. You can get all the DNA, or what makes a fish, or makes anything really. We can catch it all in this little vial of water. Or if it's not a fish and we can't catch the water from it, there's what's called hair traps, where sometimes you can just go to like a barbed wire fence and see hair stuck to it, and from that hair we can tell what was in the area. Just a few different animal tracks related things I want to talk about. Some animals use tracks to go and like show off where they are to other animals. So like bucks or like male deer, they'll scrape up the ground and get all of their scent in that area, showing like all the females, I'm the best buck of the round. So that's one way that animal tracks will talk to one another. Another way that animal tracks are important is with red fox, or really most fox. Wherever their front paws go, their back paws land in that exact same spot to minimize the amount of tracks that are in an area. Because predators or things that would eat the fox, they'll look for those tracks and they'll just follow them. And so if there's less tracks around because they're stepping in their own tracks, it makes it harder for the predator to find them. And I talked about whenever animals are very rare, an example here is of the Florida panther. There's not very many of these panthers left. I mean, maybe 200 or so left in the entire state, not very many. And so it comes down to just finding tracks of these animals to actually know where they are. Another type of track that I use pretty regularly is for sea turtles. So we have like 5 different species of sea turtles in Florida, but these are the 3 most common types right here. The loggerhead sea turtle, the green sea turtle, and the leatherback. Leatherback can grow to be about 7 foot long, so their track is much bigger than the other 2. So we can easily throw out, like, we know which one a leatherback is. But for green and loggerhead sea turtles, they're pretty much the same size for the most part. But loggerhead, they have very like swishy, like if one arm goes up, the other arm goes down, versus green sea turtles, both their arms flip at the same time. And where we see these is at the beach whenever a sea turtle is laying their eggs. These sea turtles can weigh a couple hundred pounds, and so it takes a lot of energy and it takes a lot of movement to go and get these sea turtles on land. So whenever they make these big tracks on the sand, it's a major thing to go and see. Again, they're like they're saying here, 4 foot wide, and they can be 100 feet long, if not more. As for the animal tracks that you're going to try to see on Thursday, or whenever you do your outdoor portion, you're most likely going to see maybe deer or maybe rabbit tracks. You're going to go and see a bunch of land animals for the most part. And whenever a track is first made, it's pretty defined. So you can go and see this picture of the deer track on the right side here. You can see the little prongs looking things like this. That's a deer track. And in sand or in mud, those tracks are pretty easy to find. In snow, it's the same thing. So you can see on the left side, it's a pretty well-defined track. But as time goes by, these tracks either get covered up by snow, if you're somewhere really cold, or if it's somewhere muddy or sandy, rain can wash away tracks. So if you see a track, it's pretty new for the most part. Aside from big mammal tracks, so like deer or rabbits, smaller things can also make tracks. So you may have seen a snake track before, or example here is of a bug. So bugs on really fine sand are able to go make their own tracks. I think it's pretty cool. As for the quiz, because you always have a little assignment part of your handout, these are the 3 tracks I want you to identify. So once we're done zooming, you can try to figure out, or I can email this to you, and you can figure out which of these tracks is what animal. And to help you find out, like last week, I have a little guide or an ID book to go and look up what track is which. Something kind of neat about tracks, and you don't think about it at first, but it's kind of self-explanatory, is the bigger an animal is, or the heavier it is really, the deeper its tracks are. So something really, really small, or something very light, like a bird, their tracks aren't very deep. But if you go to a bear or to a deer, where a deer has much weight or a lot of weight, but really tiny feet, they dig in really deep to the ground. So it's kind of self-explanatory. The bigger something is, the bigger track it makes, but you never put the pieces together sometimes. All right, so now if you have any questions, now it's time to ask. Otherwise, I'll just email you that PowerPoint so you can do that quiz.